President Cyril Ramaphosa is at the African Renaissance Conference in KwaZulu-Natal in Durban. It'll focus on trade between African countries. The president is about to speak. Let's listen in.
Growth in sectors such as shipbuilding and repair and oil and gas support. We have no doubt that when oil rigs start visiting our coastline on a regular basis, this industry will grow exponentially. As we stated during the State of the Province address, we stand ready to take advantage of these and other new opportunities and a chance to redirect and recharge our economic growth. We, however, cannot ignore some worrying trends which, if left unattended, have the potential to derail the working relationship with our social partners and neighbors, as well as our march to economic growth. Recently, organized business in KwaZulu-Natal expressed alarm at what they call the escalation of uncertainty linked to the following recent events. The banning of trucks on the N3 Mooi River toll gate, which disrupted traffic and affected a number of sectors. Construction sites, invasions, extortions, and rising tensions in townships among local traders. Attack at the mosque in Verulam, and political killings that are occurring in our province. As a provincial government, we consider these and similar incidents in a very serious light. Although we are still going to meet with the business sector, and we do have plans scheduled for that, but I do want to share here on this platform that in this regard, during SOPA, we committed to hold a series of stakeholder engagements with a cross-section of the KwaZulu-Natal community. These engagements were identified, amongst others, sectors such as faith-based organizations, traditional leaders, and business. To this end, we will, within 30 days, convene a meeting of strategic stakeholders in the business sector. We are keen to hear from organized business and our social partners who are organized, labor, and civil society on the growth and development of the economy. With regard to political violence, I can also confirm that we are expecting the report of the Moerane Commission into political killings by the end of this month. As you may be aware, the President has also instructed an interministerial team of the security cluster to urgently look at political killings in the province. Mr. President, we applaud you for your leadership on this matter, and we will provide all the necessary support as work is being done in this regard. With regards to calls by the Northern Region Business Association to shut down spazas owned by fellow African migrants, as government we have made it very clear that the law must be kept at all times. At a meeting held on 15th May in KwaMashu, we established a task team made up of all sides to update the database of spazas in the Inanda and KwaMashu area with a view to identifying illegal ones. We agreed that no individual or group has a right to shut down any business. We also agreed that all unregistered spazas will be closed down following a legal process led by the City of eThekwini. However, we want to introduce a system of regulations which will ensure that there is order in the operations of these mini shops. We will not allow uncontrolled mushrooming of the spaza shop again in eThekwini. This is because we have identified this as the primary factor causing tension between South African-born traders on one side and the Somalis and Ethiopians in particular on the other side. I must reassure all and sundry that this conflict has nothing to do with xenophobia, but is a struggle over limited resources in the townships and the limited market. Importantly, we intend assisting the sector with sustained support and ranging from training to finance. We have also agreed in the long term to examine complaints about the negative impact of malls on local businesses. We are in the meantime, through economic development, tourism and environmental affairs, piloting a revolving loan project and will soon finalize a bulk buying support program for small businesses. On 24th May, which is today, will be the we are supposed to have updated all our progress in this matter. But yesterday, I'm aware that the MEC for Economic Development already held a meeting with the warring parties in that area. We wish to urge all sides to exercise restraint and to allow us to address the issues that have been raised during recent consultations. Concerning blockading of the N3 toll plaza, we have convened an urgent meeting with the truck operators and will soon be meeting with the drivers. We have identified the issue as relating to the employment of foreign drivers. While we discuss the matters with the relevant departments, including Labour Department, we have now focused our security cluster on the N3 corridor and are engaging the local community to ensure that the past events are not repeated. No roads must be blockaded or property banned just because there are grievances of any kind. Program Director, I've used this platform to provide some update and to assure you and the people of KwaZulu-Natal we cannot afford the undermining of our economic road plans, as these incidents are threatening to do so. This includes the invasions and extortions that are carried out throughout the city by a group demanding empowerment and inclusion in major projects. We will not allow any incursions into infrastructure development projects in our province for any reason. As the MEC for HR has indicated before, we have established structures for engagement with business and stakeholders, and we would like this to take precedence. While we are generally in agreement that transformation must take place, this must never disturb the smooth functioning of our economy. We are therefore, as we engage with the business sector, listen to their concerns, listen to their views on solutions, but also together find the best way of ensuring that there is stability, which we should all together work towards, but also together make sure that there are new and innovative ways of how economic transformation will be persecuted. Program Director, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, my major task this morning was merely to set the scene for His Excellency the President of the Republic of South Africa, Mr. Cyril Matamela Ramaphosa, to address this gathering. And I now need not wait further and waste more time, seeing that none of us do not understand the biography of Mr. Ramaphosa anymore. If you don't, I'm sorry, but you can go through some of the important pages in your IT. You will find it. The President is on the rush. Let's allow him space to address all of us. I ask, therefore, that you all stand to welcome to the podium His Excellency Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, who I now have the pleasure to call to this platform. Your Excellency.
Thank you. Thank you. Let us be seated. Program Director, the Premier of KwaZulu-Natal, Mr. Willis Mkhunu, the MEC of Economic Development and Tourism, Mr. Sihle Zikalala, the founder and originator of this lecture series 20 years ago, who is still here with us, who we applaud and thank for having initiated this. Let's give him a round of applause. The Vice Chair of African Renaissance, Professor Ngubane, the Deputy Mayor of our city, distinguished guests and ladies and gentlemen, I wish to thank the African Renaissance Trust for this invitation to once again participate in this celebration of Africa Day this year, in the year in which we also mark a very important occasion, the centenaries of two very notable Africans, Utatu Nelson Mandela and Mama Albertina Sisulu. These are Africans who, at a different time in history, particularly the history of our continent, bequeathed to us values and behaviors that stand us in good stead in the 21st century. Both Tata Mandela and Mama Sisulu dedicated their lives to securing better social and economic conditions for all the people of our country and indeed of our continent as well. Just a few days ago, I was very honored to be near here in Amanzimtoti to interact with a global industrial company and a group of highly skilled and productive young South Africans in this province. They are both living proof of how our social and economic landscape is changing for the better. My visit to the South Coast took me to the Volvo truck factory, and I was accompanied by MEC Zigalala, where Volvo has firmly placed its confidence and its capital in South Africa as a vibrant, productive, and predictable investment destination. Sensitive to the need for us to promote manual work in the midst of the unstoppable march of automation, Volvo continues to invest in providing skills to its energetic team of assembly workers. Between them, these impressive young people turn the key on a new Volvo truck every 45 minutes, producing up to 10 a day, every day that they work. And they are now going to up it to 12 a day, thanks to the skills, sound working conditions, and motivation with which they have been empowered. These young workers have not only become self-sufficient individually themselves, but the material support they provide to their families means that purchasing power and personal pride and dignity are living side by side in neighborhoods around Amanzimtoti. I tell this story because it illustrates that the achievement of the African Union's Vision 2063 relies on seemingly isolated and desperate stories that are unfolding from Amanzimtoti to Abidjan, to Algiers, to Addis Ababa, to Kigali, to Nairobi, to Bujumbura, and many other places. Yet, instead of being isolated and desperate, these examples of great progress are in fact part of a rich tapestry of social and economic transformation that collectively produce a composite image of a continent on the rise. Whereas a few years ago, the magazine Economist saw fit to put on its cover a story of an Africa that is failing, which they dubbed their hopeless continent. A number of years later, those cover stories have changed, and they have said Africa is on the rise. It is therefore with a sense of hope and optimism that we find inspiration in the transformation that is sweeping across our continent in waves of varying intensity and size. These waves of development and transformation are constantly reshaping the shoreline of underdevelopment and disadvantage that used to characterize life on our continent. Hopelessness and despair are being eroded by the expansion of education and entrepreneurship on our continent and the advancing empowerment of women in African societies and communities. In March this year, the AU Summit in Kigali, Rwanda, reached the historic milestone of an agreement on the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. This agreement seeks to dissolve barriers between countries to shared opportunity and prosperity by enabling the movement of people, goods, services, and knowledge around our continent. This agreement places the best that Africa has to offer at the disposal of all Africans and promises to reduce the inequality that has dogged our continent across national borders for a very long time. Poverty and underdevelopment often exists just a few kilometers away from prosperity and progress. The agreement on an African continental free trade area took place in a continent far removed from the Africa in which Pixley Kaisa Kaseme penned his 1906 essay titled The Regeneration of Africa. Seme called for the people in the land to unite and see the continent as equal in its contribution to civilization. His generation understood that the responsibility that rested on their shoulders to restore the dignity of the African people was quite immense. They challenged the Eurocentric stereotypes of Africa as a dark continent. It was our forebears, especially those who had early contacts with their diaspora counterparts studying overseas, who exchanged ideas of how to confront colonial oppression. In the interconnected world of today, where we as Africans are set ourselves as equals, not subjects, in the global governance system and the globalized economy, we are able to sustain the thinking and work pioneered by Pixley Kaisa Kaseme. Our current task is to shape the progressive and prosperous Africa we want and the one we wish to bequeath to future generations. This future must be the outcome of a shared vision in the same way that our dismantling of the shackles of oppression and colonialism relied on solidarity and unity in resistance. Therefore, in 2018, we continue to be guided and also to be inspired by Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, Murtala Mohammed of Nigeria, Patrice Lumumba of Congo, Amilcar Cabral of Guinea-Bissau. We were also guided by Agostinho Neto of Angola, Eduardo Mondlane of Mozambique, Seretse Khama of Botswana, W.E.B. Du Bois, and Martin Luther King of the United States. Yes, Marcus Garvey of Jamaica, and our own Albert Luthuli and Nelson Mandela. They continue to be the spirits that guide us. We remain inspired by the words of Madiba when he said, "I dream of the realization of the unity of Africa, whereby its leaders combine in their efforts to solve the problems of this continent." The realization of Madiba's dream rests on leaders from all sectors of our society, leaders in government, business, labor, community, civil society, and large and across the continent. This dream that Madiba had, a dream of unity, was not only for Africa, but it was also for our own country. It was also a dream for our own very province here. If Madiba were alive today, he would say, "I dream of the realization of unity of our people here in KZN." He would have spoken very vocally and loudly and said some of the expressions of either disagreement that manifest themselves in the killing of other people that we disagree with must come to an end. Madiba would have said unity should be underpinned by dialogue, unity should be underpinned by consensus building, and that rather than resort to means where we kill each other, we should rather be sitting down and having discussions to build this unity that we also so need here in KZN. Madiba would have said the killings of one another must come to an end. And so I say here today, the killings that have been taking place in this province must come to an end. It is indeed when we find a way of sitting down and discussing what makes us differ that we are able to find peace, that we are able to find a way in which we can develop our province and indeed our country. That is what was Madiba's dream. We are also guided by the central guiding vision crafted by our continent dubbed Agenda 2063, which is the AU vision of an integrated, prosperous and peaceful Africa, driven by its own citizens and representing a dynamic force in international arena. This is a strategic framework for the socio-economic transformation of the continent over the next 50 years. It builds on and seeks to accelerate the implementation of past and existing continental initiatives for the growth and sustainable development of our continent. In seeking to fulfill this vision, in our own instance as South Africa, we are taking steps to implement a number of policies a number of policies that will make our own country be part of this development that is unfolding on our continent, so that by 2063 we are able to look back and say, yes, we played our part in developing our continent. And in our case, we want to look forward to 2030 and say, through our National Development Plan, we've been able to take important strides to develop our country. Right now, we are putting the building blocks in place, and in a number of places, the buildings are already going up. Having inherited a past that we are not proud of, we have had to embark and adopt policies that are going to rapidly advance the interests of our people. And one of those is to radically change the economic architecture of our country through our policy of radical economic transformation, which is aimed at transforming an economy that remains largely characterized by the structural flaws of a racist and patriarchal past. Our policy of radical economic transformation is also based on the imperative that as a country we should find ways of utilizing the resources of our country to full effect. This we have to do because the apartheid system designed the economy of our country, and indeed everything else in our country, in a way where the resources were just utilized to serve the interests of a minority. You come to the capital investment in our country, it was not fully exploited, it was utilized just to serve the interests of a minority. You come to human resources, the human resources of the majority of our people were blunted because they sought just to advance the resources of a small minority. You come to the most important resource in any country, land. Land also was utilized in a way as to advance the interests of a minority. Where do you find a situation where 87% of the land of a country is just set aside for less than even 10% of a population, and the majority is allocated 13%? This is what we have had to deal with, and this is what we have decided we are going to deal with, so that we utilize the full resources of our country to advance the interests of our people. That is why the question of land, therefore, has to be dealt with. We have to distribute land to our people through a process of expropriating that land and distributing it to the majority of our people. This is what we believe our forebears would have been pleased with. This is what we believe our forebears would have been proud of. To know that, yes, the resources of our country, of our continent, are being exploited to the hilt and are being used to advance the interests of all our people and not just a minority. As we noted in Parliament yesterday, millions of our people remain outside of the productive economic activity, and they are unable to contribute. They are also unable to benefit. This is so because they were locked out of the ability to contribute meaningfully. Like elsewhere on the continent, the majority of these people are young. They live far from the economic centers. They do not have the skills, work experience, or networks to find gainful employment, and they do not have the assets or the markets they need to start their own enterprises. This is the environment in which we look to collectives such as the KZN Growth Coalition, the Durban Chamber of Commerce, and the African Renaissance Trust to develop solutions and opportunities that will help us overcome the lingering poverty, unemployment, and inequality that face many people in this province and elsewhere. Working together with our provincial government, we should be able to tackle all these problems. We look to the collective leadership of this province to explore ways of giving effect to the new social compact around job creation that we are seeking to build among labor, business, and communities nationally. As leaders in this province, you are best placed to bring this effort to secure growth and development and transformation to the people of KwaZulu-Natal. As we build and move towards a national job summit, government, business, and labor and community in KwaZulu-Natal do have an opportunity to investigate how and where sustainable jobs and skills development can be implemented in this province. The experience of Volvo Trucks and its staff is a powerful example amongst many of what can be achieved and should be sustained as we set out on an ambitious drive to attract investment of $100 billion in our economy over the next 5 years. I was overjoyed when I met our mayor here, our Metro Mayor, my dear sister, and she said to me, "President, I want to join your investment envoys and travel around the world and go campaign for quite a lot of this investment to come here to eThekwini." And I said, "No, I want some of it to go to the rest of the province." And she said to me, "But Mr. President, just cut me a little bit more so that it can come here to eThekwini." Then I realized that we've got a mayor who is looking forward and who is enthusiastic about generating investments for eThekwini. And as my comrade Sihle Zikalala will tell you, he wants quite a lot of that $100 billion that we are going to raise to come here to KwaZulu-Natal. Now, these are examples that we wish to see replicated not just around eThekwini, not just around KZN, but throughout our country as well, and finally throughout the continent. Our own new dawn is part of a broader continental dawn of shared growth and prosperity, in which South Africa retains its position as a gateway to Pan-African opportunity for the peoples of this continent and our international partners. South Africa's own growth stands to benefit significantly from and contribute to the rising tide of development in our region and our continent. This rising tide entails political and economic cooperation with outcomes that include greater integration and the development of regional infrastructure, the development of services and knowledge bases that equitably benefit all member states in our continent. Investors and innovators must be made to feel at home here in Africa. They must be made to feel that this is a continent that they can come and safely invest their money in. We must be inspired by our ancestors, whose boundless creativity and majestic works endure till today. The magnificent pyramids of Egypt, the sculptures of ancient kingdoms of Ghana and Mali and Benin, the temples of Ethiopia, and the rock paintings of the Kalahari all speak volumes about Africa's innovation and contribution to human development. Increasingly, these representations of African civilization are being supplemented by advanced infrastructure, industrial parks, scientific laboratories, and corporate tower blocks that mark our continent's urban landscape. The engineers and artists of ancient times have worthy successors in a new generation of young scientists, technicians, financiers, coders, and designers. Our task is to create the conditions for this new generation to grow and to thrive and to build a continent of hope and progress. This hope and progress one sees emerging in many parts of our continent, testifying to this regeneration of Africa that was foreseen by Pixley Kaisa-Kaseme. You go through many countries of our continent. In agriculture, you go to countries such as Ethiopia, countries that were dogged by famine a few years ago. They've now become centers of excellence when it comes to agriculture. Agricultural revolutions are emerging in a number of environments on the African continent. Technological prowess is just spreading throughout the continent. Our own leadership through the SKA that we have in the Karoo is testimony that indeed Africa, freed of the shackles of colonialism, freed of the shackles of apartheid misrule, can rise to the challenge. And indeed, in many ways, we are rising to the challenge. And Africa's time indeed has arrived. The key question is, have we arrived to take advantage of Africa's time? We must constantly remind all these wonderful scientists, all these wonderful workers on our continent. We need to constantly remind them of Madiba's words, who said, "Sometimes it falls upon a generation to be great. You can be that generation. Let your greatness blossom. It is then that the brighter day of which Pixley Kaisa-Kaseme spoke that will rise upon the African continent. It is then that our chains will be dissolved, our plains will be red with harvest, and our crowded cities will send forth the hum of business. This is the Africa whose future is being seen, is being foretold also by our leaders. I want to conclude by saying, for me, as a new president, attending the African Union summits, it is actually quite a joy to see how African leaders across many countries have taken or are taking the development of our continent seriously. Whoever you talk to talks about the economic development, and not only of their own country, but of various countries in Africa. We've got a new generation of leaders on our continent who are focusing on how we can develop the people of our continent and how we can enhance the resources so that those resources can lead to economic development that will lead to the betterment of the lives of our people. Indeed, Africa is on the rise. The question is, are we going to be able to rise to the occasion and make sure that the African Renaissance that we have always spoken about indeed has dawned? Because Africa requires that all of us must put shoulder to wheel. We must commit ourselves to making this continent a successful continent. As we have always said, God bless Africa, Nkosi sikelele Africa, as it goes on its path of development and rising as a great continent. I thank you.